Hey there everybody, it's Eternal Snowman here with another BLT video, and it's finally BLT 6 season. I'm really looking forward to it, and I know a lot of other people are really looking forward to it. So I'm going to be making a video here talking about all the new things that are going on with the changes to the format and how things are going to pan out a little bit. Basically, just talking about everything that has changed since last BLT, what I think about it, and then I'll talk a little bit about all the managers. I'm not going to be doing a formal manager ranking, but I'll just talk about each managing pair, and I'll be managing again, which is going to be fun. And we're hoping, me and Trace are hoping to repeat again, just to get another win under our belts because last season was so successful for us. And I'll probably be playing again in BLT as well, so look forward to that. I'm also going to be making videos about everything from, weekly recaps or just match analysis and that kind of stuff. So let's get right into it. BLT is pretty much the most exciting time of year for Tournaments Room because this is the biggest event in my opinion. The other big event is TLT, but I think BLT is a little bit more like engaging for everyone. And I think there's a lot of things that are going to be really fun this season, with a lot of newer blood coming back into the scene. And I think it's just going to be entertaining for everybody involved. So let's see. I'm just gonna look through the information because I am actually involved kind of in the parts of determining what's going on in BLT. So I want to make sure that I don't spoil anything too big here. Okay, so there hasn't been some of the information hasn't been um, in input yet, but I will basically just be talking about all the different changes and managing pairs. So first off, one of the big changes is that because of complaints from last year, we chose to get rid of monotype as one of the 8 core tiers. So it's now Ubers, OU, UU, RU, NU, and now PU is the new tier instead of monotype. As for what I think about this, I think PU is a much more competitive tier than monotype. I have been involved in a lot of monotype stuff recently because I have a lot of friends who are in monotype, and I can kind of see like a little bit more about like monotype than before, but I still kind of feel like it is a little bit too matchup-y compared to other tiers. And I still feel like there's so many games where you can just straight up lose from team select. And so I like PU a lot more, especially because now it's becoming a more developing metagame. There's a lot more attention to it from a lot of top players, and I think it's a pretty good meta to play. Um, and I think it's a good choice to have this change made, as I'm personally not a fan of monotype, and I felt like a lot of the monotype community wasn't really into BLT because we didn't really have any good monotype players within the BLT last year. So there was a lot of coin flippy games and low kind of quality games as well. So I hope PU brings a little bit more, and because it's more of a standard tier, even players who are not PU mains can still play it at a reasonably competent level. And we do have some quite good PU players like Snow Jinri, if he and I believe he will decide to play this year. Um, so that is one of the big changes. The other big change is going to be the new formatting. So before we had we had a different kind of format with 3 weeks plus 2 weeks of playoffs, with top 4 going to playoffs. Now we have a different format. So basically, there will be 6 teams going to playoffs out of the top 8, and it'll be kind of like NFL playoffs, if anybody's familiar with that, where there's going to be a quarterfinals and then a semifinals, but the semifinals seeds are already seeded in. Also, the League of Legends competitive scene also works like this. So basically, the quarterfinal will be the third place of the one of the divisions versus the second place of the other division, and then the other will be the opposite, so the second place of the other division versus the third place of that division. And then both of the seed ones will get buys in the semifinals, or sorry, yeah, to the semifinals, and then they'll play the lose like uh, then they'll play. So basically, the semifinals, or so basically this is was implemented for two main reasons. The first is that this was a complaint that a lot of people had about how teams felt like it was unfair because they had some people had, like, don't really try all that much. This did happen with my team because like we had already won the first 2 weeks, so we didn't feel a need to win the third week that much. Even though we did end up winning, I think, or like tying that week or something like that, we didn't really bring the most serious teams, myself included. So people felt like that was not a good change. So now that playoff seeding matters now, it does matter that we have to like kind of try for every week of the 3 regular season weeks. And the other complaint was that BLT was too short. So this is bringing BLT to now 6 weeks instead of 5 weeks, which I think I would still prefer a longer BLT personally, but I can kind of see the idea behind why people don't like a longer BLT. I just feel like it's like the longest event of the year, and we spend so long qualifying for it that I feel like it should be a little bit longer than it is right now. But I do think that this compromise does make sense. And this will be like the 6 week format is still better than this 6 week format. I think it will be a little bit better than the 5 week format. And I think this is a good change overall. And I think it'll be nice. And the other one of the other changes is that tiebreakers subs will not be allowed to be used for tiebreakers. This is pretty big because I kind of our team in particular kind of cheated with this because we got Mysterious M as a substitute and he was pretty big for our team and he was basically a free pick, which is pretty unfair considering Mysterious M is normally like a 15k player and he did play in the finals tiebreaker for us as well. So I felt like that was just something that was nice to, like, I think that it was a necessary thing that should be done. And yeah, I know I kind of abused those rules before, but you know, any basically you got to do what you got to do to win, man. So that is basically it for all the changes. Oh, and there is one more thing. Um, it's technically not listed on this thread, but I don't really think that this will be like, oh, something to write home about. I think it's fine for me to say this. Basically, that the manager prices will also be going up. So I don't know the final price yet. I don't know if it's determined, but I believe we're currently sitting around 12.5K for managers instead of 10K. And this is basically because of the complaint, because my team, as well as some of the other teams like MJ's team, were buying really high priced players because I would go for at least 15K for 10K. So, and it's not contested. So, like, that's basically how the reason why this up is happening. So, everything else for the auction is going to be the same. So, 80K for 80K for 8 players and then snake draft for subs afterwards, no mid-season, whatever. So that's just the only change will be the price for the managers, and it's mostly because a lot of the playing managers are higher quality players. So it does make sense because you're getting a kind of a discount if you are managing. Like a pretty significant one in the case if it's like myself or Friso Eva or MJ or Jordan or Plaz or these players. It's not the case for everybody, but for a lot of the players, it will be a pretty big discount. And there's nothing else. So like, you know, whatever. Um, those are the main big changes. So now let's get into the teams and let's talk a little bit about all the teams and their managers. So of course, leading the way is myself and Trace, Sunny Snore Snorlaxes. We are the defending champions of BLT, and we brought back the same name as well, which is misspelled, I believe. I think Sunny Shore has two N's. Don't quote me on that though, because I have no idea. So that's going to be fun, and we're looking for another repeat, or we're looking for a repeat, and this will be a three-peat for Trace, I believe. So this will be a pretty fun season, and we're looking to win it all again. So I mean, I think we're going to be basically favorites coming in just because of the experience that me and Trace have managing together, and he has managing. And then my playing ability for whatever the manager cost is, I think gives us a pretty big leg up to begin the tournament. And just because a lot of the top players will want to play for us because we are the kind of de facto duo here. Not to be like kind of cocky or anything. There are definitely some other managing pairs that are pretty well respected as well. But I will say that we're probably some of the most well respected players here. So I think we have a pretty good shot at winning it this year if everything goes into our plan. And just without any knowledge of the draft or anything, this is something that I think we have a good shot at doing. So next up is the Blobby Blue Blastoises. This is a terrible name, by the way. Um, it's Silver, White, Blue, and Rob 576. So I think that they will be. So I talked a little bit about in last BLT, I put a lot of emphasis on the playing managers aspect because I felt that if you didn't have a playing manager, that was good. So like I think the four teams that did have a playing manager, I felt had a pretty big advantage, because of how strong the discount is. I think this year the discount is the discount is getting nerfed like by a pretty significant margin. I do think it's less important that you have a playing manager. However, it also predicates that you should have a really good draft. Outside of that, because being able to lock down a top player for 12.5k, even if it is like a small discount or even no discount at all in some cases, I think it is important because it gives you a basic building block going into the draft, and you'll have less things to have to worry about because you'll have a certain tier locked up or like certain X tiers that that player could play. So it gives you more flexibility in the draft, in my opinion. So like when going into this, I think Silver, White, Blue, and Rob will have to pick up that slack in other places. They have been relatively successful in the past, or at least Silver, White, Blue has been in drafting and stuff. So I think you can still pull this team to a decent position, but I would say that they're not as good as some of the other teams just from the perspective of like how qualified are these guys as managers, how qualified are these guys as drafters, how qualified are these guys as players. I don't think that they'll be able to get to the point where they're as good as myself and Trace or like MJ and Ziri. So next up, Rosie Bear and the Wall, and they have had a pretty good. They're coming off like a decent season last year, and I think they'll be a pretty good duo. Either of them could be the player manager, and I think they're both pretty decent, like in their respective tiers. I don't really think that it's like a huge discount. I mean, I think the Welsh Wall should go for a little bit higher than his price, depending on who joins the RU pool. And then Rosie Bear, like again, depending on who joins the OU pool, I don't even think it would be that much of a discount at all. Because we have had good OU players in the past, come like Mail and Charm Flash and those kind of players. So we'll have to see who joins the pool really to say if it's a huge discount, but I do think that they're pretty good, and they have had decent success before this tournament as well. So I'll say that they're like middle of the pack, maybe slightly above average kind of team coming in here. And then Friso Eva and Jordan, I think this team will be pretty good in terms of playing. The big question mark will be managing though. Both players have minimal managing experience. I'm actually not sure about Jordan's managing experience. He might have. He didn't manage OMPL, so maybe they do have it in them. But that is basically the question mark because they don't really have that much experience. That said, in my experience, that kind of thing doesn't matter as much as people may say, put it out to be. But I would still put them towards the top because they do have options. Both players for Soeva and Jordan will be extremely good for a player manager. So whoever chooses to play will give them a pretty big leg up on the competition, and they'll be one of the top player managers. And so that would be big for them, but it will really come down to how their draft goes and how they choose to really like manage the personalities and that kind of stuff. I do know that Jordan is more willing to take risks on players who like have kind of personality issues, if you know what I mean, than like some of like myself and Trace would, because I feel like he's like, I mean, I don't know, like sometimes he does take more of a risk on that kind of stuff. So we'll really have to see how they choose to draft and how they choose to play it out, because it could go really well for them. And I would say that they're one of the top teams. And one of the teams I'm the most scared of, I would say, I would probably, if I had to rank them, probably put them at third, maybe. Yeah, but we'll see. And then Azalea Alakazam's coming off a good season last year as well. They lost in the semifinals. However, MJ is well respected, and I mean, they lost to us, who were the eventual winners. So I do think that they're a big threat to us in general. I think that they have a lot of potential to be a strong team. I have heard that Ziri is going to be the player manager, which, I mean, this is basically the best you can ask for because he is basically a top player in PU and is probably going to be the best PU player that joins BLT. Like I see like he's one of the top PU players in general, and I would say like very few players are better than him, and I don't think any of those guys are going to be joining BLT. So it's basically the best that you could ask for from a player manager. And MJ has a lot of experience both managing and playing, so I really see this as a really big success. I mean, I do rate them higher, maybe because of a little bit of bias of them being my friends and stuff, and same with Frisso and Jordan. But I do think that they're probably the second best team just going into this tournament, if not better than us, I guess. It really just depends on how everything pans out. And because last season MJ was with Samjo, and Samjo did have a lot of success as a manager before, I do think that a lot more pressure will be on MJ to manage the personalities and that kind of stuff. So we'll see how he succeeds or like thrives under that condition. I think he'll be fine. I don't really think that will be a big issue for them. Moving on, Plaz and Raj.Shu are the next team. And I would say they're also kind of middle of the pack, slightly above average team. Plaz is a fantastic player manager. However, the real issue will come with kind of drafting and seeing how the team pans out, because last season Plaz also drafted like an insane team and they didn't do that well. And I'm not really saying this is Plaz's fault, because like I think that they could be a really good team still, but it's just that um, because he didn't show it last season, I expect a little bit more, or need to see a little bit more from him to really convince me that it's like they're good enough to win. And so we'll see how it pans out. I mean, he did really get a really tough division, and he like it was hard, of course, but it was a little bit disappointing last year. After he had such a good draft that a lot of people were saying that they could win the entire thing with that draft, and they didn't make it out of groups. So it's really just it depends a lot. I mean, there are definitely a lot of variables going into this. There's like luck involved, and drafting things, and like player personalities, whatever. But I would say that they're a little bit lower than perhaps other people would rate them, in my opinion, just because of his lack of success last year. And that does factor in for me. And then the Rustboro Reshiram's managed by King Leo and Alpha Widom. So I think that um, the Leo is a decent player manager. Like I think he's a little bit below average when compared to the other ones, but I do think he's still good. Like he's good enough to pick as a player manager, um, even with the increased price. Um, really depends because we do have SMB who will likely join, and then if Cheese joins as well, the Cheese in one, then he'll only be like the third best doubles player, and in that case, it's like he's a good manager. Like that's a good pick, but it's not fantastic. And Leo hasn't had success as much as some of these other players or managing pairs, so I would rate them pretty low, honestly. Um, just because like last season they didn't do fantastic either. So it'll like a lot of pressure will really be on them to perform this year because of the lowered like expectations from, or I guess that doesn't really make sense, but it'll be on them to perform this year because like last year they didn't really make any big splashes. It does mean that in a the lower tier teams, or in my opinion, lower tier teams are still more likely to make the playoffs this year because there are this top six, which means that if given a little bit of a chance, they could sneak up in there towards the top. And because of that, when you're like given a few series, like just one series to prove yourself, like in that quarterfinal series, it could be different. Because like we saw this last year with the White Forest Weaviles. Even though the Weaviles had kind of like a mediocre roster, and I mean I placed them at eighth, and I thought that their roster was bad compared to the rest of the league. Um, I do think that they were able to kind of sneak out of groups just barely and then get into the finals just barely because of like if you're like a lot of stuff can happen in one series. So like even though I felt like their team wasn't that good, they still managed to scrap together a few wins and almost even won the entire thing, if not for like I mean, they went to tiebreaker with us. So they had like a pretty good chance to even win the entire thing, but we locked it up. So that was nice. But the White Forest Weavile, speaking of they're coming back, and Negatory is going to be managing again alongside Ninja Dog. Ninja Dog was one of the best players on my team last year, and it's going to be like he's probably going to be the player manager, and that's a really good pickup, and it's definitely worth the amount of money. And he's going to be one of the best LC players. So I would say that they have the experience because Negatory kind of pulled together a team that wasn't really a contender, in my opinion, and pulled them to finals through however, like, whatever, which way. And I think that because of that, I feel like they do kind of deserve a little bit of credit. I don't think that they're as good as like the Heatrans or the Alakazams or even us. I mean, in my opinion, we're the best team coming into this just because we are the defending champions. I do think I'm allowed to say that. But the Weaviles, I do think, deserve a lot of credit because they did kind of, they're taking they're taking two guys who, one led a mediocre team to the finals and the other guy won um, like the finals last year. So we'll have to see where they can like go. But like I feel like they have a pretty high ceiling. But at the same time, I feel like if things go wrong, they can still have a low floor. Especially because if the draft goes the same way, like I don't know how good they're going to be able to draft because like last year their draft was pretty bad. So even though they managed to scrap together and go to finals, like I still think that they didn't have a good draft. So we'll have to see how everything pans out. And I'm looking forward to BLT. there's going to be qualifications, and then the actual BLT event is still like a little bit of a whiles away. But excuse me. Um, but it will still be fun, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'll be looking to make videos on a relatively regular basis about all the stuff going on in BLT, whether that be different news and announcements or uh, you know, qualifications, that kind of stuff. So I'll see you guys in the next video, which will probably be coming out in some like a month or whatever, about whatever other BLT things are going on. And yeah, and if you like this video, then whatever, do whatever you want actually. All right, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.